everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome to Kind Mind Room for the Zoom of 2023. And I'm excited, ecstatic, beyond to be hosting my dear friend, Hannah Studley.
Hi.
Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for doing this. It's such a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, it certainly is. We had a couple minutes beforehand to talk about, just the things that brought us together and the experiences that all of us people have when we come into human contact. This was prior to COVID. And we were discussing the place where that connection happened. And that was in the 3P world. I traveled over to London, and Hannah and I were able to meet and connect and have this amazing female to female conversation around doing service, because we were both working. She was the volunteer head for the conference that weekend. And the one thing I noticed about her was the vibrancy that she had when I went. Like I was managing on my own. I was coming over there for the first time. And Hannah just scooped me up, took me on my way, guided me to where I was supposed to be. And that was the reason why the answer was absolutely yes, when she said to me that she had just finally finished her new book, Very Well. And she said, let's do a conversation around what that's about, what it looks like. And so, Hannah, I'm so glad to be here with you.
Thank you.
So I want to welcome everybody who is new to the Kind Mind Room and is new to reading this book, and possibly even Hannah, because we come from separate communities, and that just brings a whole bunch of beautiful people together, which is even better. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for being here this morning. So I'm going to begin with talking about Hannah and just explaining some of the things. I could have written a book on what this woman has done, but I've cut it to the short notes, and I'm just going to give you some of the things that I feel are pertinent to this conversation and to me. So Hannah, third novel. Hello, third novel, which is unbelievable for a lot of people. And we're talking about the myth of low self-esteem, and we're also talking about painless, and now the book Very Well. So that's accomplishment in itself. I haven't even written a book yet. So there you have it. As a speaker for international and global rooms, Hannah comes with the mind-body connection. She's really bringing that place where we as women, as well as men in the world we live in right now, the mind and body connection together. So I welcome that conversation personally. And I'm so glad that you're offering it to this community of 3P and also the world with the book Very Well. Some say her mind body work is as profound as the neuroscientist was Candace Pert. And some of you may have read and understand what she was doing back in the day. And we were talking about back in the day in the book of Very Well. We were going way back. And that was some of the luring things that brought my awareness to why I wanted to read this book. She is also a survivor of 3 muggings and severe PTSD, and has been dancing on the dance floors with John Travolta. So I am so glad to have you here to explore hormones and the adventure novel Very Well. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. You're so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny when you're saying like writing 3 novels. They say everybody has a book inside of them, and people kept saying to me, oh, you should write, a book about your Hollywood experiences, or you should write a book about, trauma, or about changing careers or countries. And I did actually write a book a long time ago, just like writing it on a document. And it was way too preachy and teachy. I thought nobody needs to read that, So then I got this idea of turning it into stories. And I just really enjoy it. I do like reading research. I'm kind of weird like that. But when I'm reading research, I often kind of wonder, who is it that shows up for a pain research? Is it like starving students? Is it people who like pain? There's, who are the doctors doing this? So when I read research, I kind of see stories in what I'm reading. And so, that the first book came out, and then immediately I had ideas for boom, like 2 or 3 more books just came to me straight away, almost the next day. Right? And it was kind of spooky. It was almost like this, well of creativity that I never knew was there kind of just opened up. And right now I've already half written the next one because it was kind of on the shelf, waiting for these 2 to come out. And I've got ideas for 2 more and possibly a non-fiction book too. That's kind of like in the back of my mind somewhere. So yeah, it's like this fountain has been unleashed.
The insightful fountain of book writing, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
So why, why hormones?
Good question. So when I first came across the three principles, these ideas that, we talk about and I'm writing about in the book, I was just going through menopause at the time, just before I came across the principles, and I was having a horrible time. I'd been coaching people for 30 years. I'd done a lot of transformational, personal self-help type stuff. You name it, whichever guru, I'd followed them. I'd done that work, and, from expressive writing and meditation and, living in Southern California at the time, I'd done a lot of stuff. And then my perimenopause, which can last for about 10 to 12 years. Most women only go through it for maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. I had it for over 10 years, of hot flashes and night sweats and brain fog. And it got so bad at the end that I was having hot flushes every 20 minutes. I was literally sweat dripping off my nose. I wasn't getting any sleep because I was being woken up several times during the night. And it's very hard to function when you're having fever all the time. And then the final straw for me was I started feeling really dizzy just before each hot flush. I would feel, the best way I can describe it is as if someone had taken my batteries out, like the Energizer Bunny. And I just went like this, and I'm trying to teach and I'm trying to work and it was really hard to function. And I tried toughing it out for several years. I tried bioidenticals, I kind of write about it in the book. And I really wanted to do the healthy alternative. And then finally, my alternative bioidentical doctor actually sent me back to my GP, my family practitioner, and put me on HRT for a short while. His expression was to tame the tiger. It was that bad. And at that point, it was so bad. I didn't care if it was going to give me cancer. I just how can you live? How can you function? And I had very little information, very little support. When I told my doctor, who's an excellent doctor, all he could do for me was maybe give me a prescription for antidepressants. And I remember saying to him, but I'm not depressed. Right? And he said, well, you've just told me you want to cry all the time, hide in your room and eat chocolate. And I was like, well, what woman doesn't? and then
Exactly.
so then I never took the prescription because I knew that wasn't the problem. And then I came across the three principles, and not only did my pain go away, but my menopause symptoms, and I didn't make the connection for quite a few years until a couple of years ago, that they kind of subsided and melted away too. And I'm so grateful for that, because it kind of gave me my life back. My symptoms kind of just ebbed and melted away. And I really see it as, like we can talk more about, but the science that I discovered really backs up the fact that we are always feeling our thinking.
I'd love for you to go into the sciences, because there was a lot of detail around that and some very interesting acronyms I had to look up and some really pointed points around what women suffer from. So please tell us a little bit about the science.
Yeah. So, and this is so funny because I am so not a scientist. I'm an artistic type. So I also had to Google a lot of stuff and just trying to work out what these, scientists and researchers were talking about. So the way I kind of discovered it was there's, whenever I do research for my books, I tend to join Facebook groups to find out what people are talking about. I did it with the chronic pain. I've done it with trauma, long COVID, histamine intolerance, different things I've researched. It's one thing reading what the scientists say, but I like to go into the Facebook groups and see what actual people are saying and how they're, actually experiencing it. And I came across this group for women with PMDD. So for those of you who don't know, PMDD, it's an actual diagnosis. It stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And the best way I can describe it, I personally did not have it, but it's the way women have described it to me is kind of like PMS on steroids. It's so bad that these women are suicidal. And my heart goes out to them because it's so painful. every month, and they can tie their ups and downs in their moods and their suicidal thinking to their monthly cycle. That's how you get that diagnosis, as opposed to general anxiety disorder, for example. So the women with PMDD, there's an organization. So I wrote to them and I asked for some research help, and they directed me to this video that I found on YouTube, which breaks my heart. It's disappeared. I put a link to it in the book, but it's actually been taken down, and I've just written to the professor to see if we can find the original source of it. Her name is Dr. Susan Girdler, and she's a professor of reproductive mood disorders at North Carolina University. And I found this video of her giving a lecture, and the lecture lasts about an hour, but in the book, those of you who've read it, you'll see in the middle of the book, I kind of split it into 2 chapters, and I purposely broke it up and made my characters go to the lecture and give coffee breaks and lunch breaks, just to kind of make the science a little bit more palatable. Because the first few people who read my book, including Jack Pransky, like the science was just like, over people's heads, and like, what? No, it was kind of a turnoff. But so I tried to make it as palatable as possible. So, okay, so this is what I found. Dr. Girdler did some research where she had 2 groups of women. One group had this diagnosis of PMDD, and the other group, she referred to them as healthy, which I kind of found that a little objectionable, because like, we're all healthy, thank you. But that's maybe another conversation. Anyway, so she did hormone testing with them. Now, before I continue, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in my teens and early 20s, and I did have PMS, which is, monthly moodiness, when that was happening, I would have told you something like, oh, my hormones are out of whack, or my hormones are driving me crazy this month, something like that. I don't know how or why, but I got the idea that there was something malfunctioning. Something wasn't going right in my body. And that's why this month I was having such a terrible time. Like I used to describe it like a magnifying glass on all my problems would just blow up in my face. And I'd have to kind of almost lock myself in my room for 3 days so I don't cause any harm, So I don't know if anybody can identify with that. So she had these 2 groups, and she wanted to do hormone testing. So this is where I found this fascinating. She tested their hormones, and I've learned that a blood test doesn't really tell you much. You need to do a P test over a period of days. And she discovered that their hormone levels were exactly the same. Right? Here I am thinking, we get this moodiness, we get these drops in, we get depression or anxiety because our hormones are malfunctioning somehow. And she explained it can happen after birth. It happens when we're going through perimenopause. There's lots of other situations in life where a woman's hormones are naturally going up and down. I mean, that's why we call it a cycle. Every month there's a drop and a raise in our hormones. And what she noticed is that was exactly the same for the group she called healthy and the group she was calling who had this diagnosis of PMDD, who were suicidal. So being a good doctor, she got curious and she wanted to see, why was it this group of women were suffering so much? So she went back to them and she surveyed them and she asked them a lot of questions. And it definitely wasn't 100%, but the large majority of them had some history of either trauma, abuse, or some situation that kind of led to prolonged stressful thinking. And she then, in the rest of the lecture, she then goes into how that affects the nervous system and how it kind of predisposes us to be hypersensitive to everything. If you've gone through something like that, especially in childhood or, in adolescence, when our brains and our nervous systems are still developing. So for the women with PMDD, what was happening was their monthly cycle, which was quite normal, was almost like another trauma for them to deal with. Like, that drop that, in a good state of mind, you might not even notice, or just like, it's that time of the month. But for them, it was like, devastating. And then when you get so worked up about something, it might take you a few more days to get over it. And then you start anticipating next month. because you know next month's coming, right? It's not like a
Yes.
fight with your sister or your boss where like it might not happen again. You know next month's coming. And so they start anticipating next month. So they're already revving themselves up for another nightmare. So some of these women were only having about a day or two a month when they felt vaguely okay, which to me is heartbreaking. And I can tell you already, some of the women who've read my book, their symptoms are going away. And the diagnosis isn't relevant anymore, which is such a relief and such a blessing to, bring this to people, to women who are suffering.
I love how you're speaking about like it's a premeditated thought that we put on ourselves, thinking, okay, I'm 4 days away from my period. I'm 3 days away from my period. And it's like the rabbit in the foxhole.
Yeah.
So we're on hypersensitivity. And it makes sense that we'd be running in that stream and would create that fog and that discomfort and the chocolate and all the other things that we wanted to self-medicate.
Yeah.
No, I think the science was what attracted me. I don't know about everybody else, but the science was something that really caught me off guard in some ways, and also caught me in relevance because I thought, oh, that's what I did. That's what I did and was doing. Because if you know there's something coming that's going to be different, traumatic, not so, out of your control and not comfortable.
Yeah.
Thinking about it before it even arrives.
Yeah.
So I get that. I really do get that. So tell me a little bit more about the book. So cover choice, title, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's so funny. All the titles of my books just kind of like pop into my head. I can't remember where the very well came from now. I was reading something. It might even been a footnote in like a research thing. And it might have, I know it was a title of an article or something. And I just thought, ooh, there we go. Because there's two ways you can say very well. You can say like, oh, very well, like my mother would have done that. Oh, very well, right? Or you can say, you're going to do very well, right? And in my community where I live, a lot of people, when they're saying goodbye, they go, be well. And at first I think like, well, how can you be well? But it's like I've started saying it myself, like, when you say, good luck or goodbye or, lots of love, all the best, be well. It's such a nice thing to, like, a nice greeting to part somebody with. And then the cover, the woman on the front cover, her name is Bertha Pappenheim, and it really is such an unsung hero, which is why I kind of wanted to put that into the book. When I was back reading research on trauma for my first book, I came across her story. Judith Herman, who's got a famous book on recovering from trauma, she gives like 2 pages to Bertha Pappenheim and explains that she was actually Freud and his partner Breuer. She was their first client, first patient. And Freud claimed that he cured her. And he cured her she had some terrible experiences. She actually had what a lot of doctors have assessed their notes, and today they think she probably had either epilepsy or maybe some kind of brain fever and some kind of neurosis type thing in like an organic thing. And Freud wanted to decide that, that psychoanalysis was going to fix her. And Bertha actually came up with the title of talking therapy, talking cure. And then they abandoned her, literally, overnight. And she ended up in hospital in Switzerland. They've got documents to prove that she was in the sanitarium in Switzerland, addicted to morphine. And they're telling the world that they cured her. And so, and Bertha's story is so amazing. I don't want to give it all away because I put it into the book, but I just want to tell you, she came out of a mental hospital at like 19 or 20 and published a children's book 2 years later. I mean, I've got Amazon, publishing on demand to help me, and it's still pretty difficult, to get it out. But, back in the 1800s, how did she do that? This woman was amazing. So that's kind of why I wanted to highlight her story as like a subtext, along with Helen and the other characters in the book. So you get to hear what an amazing woman she was. She was so selfless and went on to help so many other people. But yeah, so I paid for the rights to print her photograph, which I need to send them a copy of the book. And yeah, her name's Bertha Pappenheim, an amazing woman. Mm-hmm.
I love that the legacy that she, well, the work that she did is now becoming her legacy even long after, she's gone.
Yeah.
And I also know that she was the founder of Jewish Women's Association as well.
Yeah.
Which also says a lot for the umpteen things that I read about that she did.
Mm-hmm.
And that also, for those of you who are listening, that also is part of the reason why I enjoyed this book so much, was because it was illuminating me on people and things that I would have never looked at before if I hadn't read the book. And so I also think that part of the book is very important, Hannah, that you included those very amazing women doing really amazing work that had traumas, long before we've experienced them as adults, right? Or as women.
Yeah.
So my last question, maybe, I don't know how our time is, we still got time. So why do you think women still shy away from opening up and sharing about their period, their menstrual cramps, their traumas, their fogginess, their peri and post-menopause? Why do you think that is?
I mean, we have a history of, I touch on it a little bit in the book about, we have a history that women's bodies are second best and broken. And what was it I wrote in the book? It was something like, womenmen's bodies are like men's bodies, but turned
inside out.
Inside out.
I remember that.
I do. Who said that? But I have to look at the quote. But women's.
I don't want to remember that person.
Right. Right. But
obviously, crazy concept, really, though. I mean, it's prehistoric.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was a man who said that. And a lot of the early medical books, I'm talking, back in the 16, 1700s, were written by men, obviously. And what was alarming to me is a lot of these men hadn't even seen a woman's body, let alone know how it works. Because imagine back in those times of 1500, like around Shakespeare's kind of time, being able to read and write was, very much a privileged thing. Only the either rich and wealthy or people in the religious community, like monks and priests, had the ability to write. So monks and priests didn't really come into contact with many women. So a lot of what they
really like a womanly thing in the church now, was it?
Right. I mean, it's kind of hysterical now we think about it, but they wrote a lot on conjecture. Like they imagined what it was like because they knew women's bodies were different and they were kind of messy. That's how they wrote about it. And so we've kind of inherited this legacy that women's bodies malfunction, they're going wrong, and they need fixing. And I mean, I grew up on the tail end of feminism, and I don't need to talk about, periods and, cramps and stuff myself. I have nothing against women if they want to do that. But I do feel quite strongly that, I have two older brothers. So I was, when my period started, I remember my mother asking me to, when I went into the bathroom to take care of myself, to hide things in my pocket. She wouldn't even say the words, she said, because you don't want your brothers or your father to see. And I was, I think it was 13 or 14. And I'm like, okay, because like, it's something to be hidden. It's something to be ashamed of. It's something, that we don't talk about. And now I'm not saying we have to shout it from the rooftops. I'm, come kind of, back around to it's just normal, I just want to be normal about it. And so I think by talking about it in appropriate circles, in situations like this, I knew nothing about menopause when I came to be dealing with it. Like the way I wrote about it in the book, like Helen just waking up several nights in a row thinking she was getting sick, and then I went, oh my gosh, I've had night sweats. Like, that can't be. And I really was shocked. Because I say I don't have any sisters. My mother passed away, but before that time. And most of my friends at that time were younger than me. So I really didn't have anyone to discuss it with. And then you start researching it, and there's so much misinformation. And the pharmaceutical companies, they they are, call me cynical because I am, but they really want to, sell medications, and there's others who want to sell treatments. And it's all going towards this idea that we're broken and there's something wrong. And it's just not true. And that was one of the fascinating things I learned about hormones, especially in menopause, is we've actually gone full cycle. And we've gone back to I think Dr. Girdler says this, we've gone back to our preteen hormone levels. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm just repeating what I read, but I'm 10 years into menopause now, and I'm like, and things were a bit bumpy the first few years, but it's just not such a big deal anymore. And now it's like, I even feel like my metabolism is going back to when I was a teenager, which was pretty cool because I could eat anything and not put any weight. That's past. So yeah, it's I don't say I don't feel like I'm a campaigner for, we need to talk about this, but I do feel that it's the message I want to give out is that we're not broken, and it's all very natural to go through all these things and nothing to be frightened about.
And all that conversation, whatever it is that comes up for individuals and the women in this room and wherever this takes us, all of that is mental health. That is the health we're speaking, understanding what actually is going on, knowing that it's natural. It's an organic experience. Your innate health is organic. And it is, I loved your words. You just said full cycle. It's a full cycle. We're cycling to the, what was the unknown to now the known of what we are seeing. And the book is just exploiting that unknown in the most beautiful way. Really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Beautiful. So let's open the room up to anybody who has questions about the book, about hormones, about science, whatever you got. Anybody want to?
Or it could be about the story or
your own experience, even that.
I just like to say how much I enjoyed it, Hannah, and how much I'm looking forward to rereading it. Because I was enjoying it so much, I sort of sped through it. So it's sort of bits of it are sinking in, and I'd like to take it slower on the second reading and really enjoy it again.
Oh, thank you. That's like the best recommendation when somebody wants to read it again. It's funny, like Kelly and I, like I said at the beginning, we don't have a copy of the book because it's still on its way from Amazon. I'm really looking forward to holding it in my hand and reading it again. I mean, obviously when you're editing, you have to read it over and over again, but there's something different about holding it in your hand and reading it as a book. So yeah, thank you, Katrina, for your support. It's really much appreciated. Thank you.
I agree with you, Katrina. The little chunks sort of for me better slowly as well. I will enjoy a second read. Angelina. Hi, welcome.
Hannah, the book was brilliant. I devoured it. I wouldn't wait for Amazon to post it to Ireland, so I just got it on my Kindle. Yeah, like that. Different things resonated, and amazingly, some of it resonated in relation to relationships, not just, we'll say, in relation to hormones and stuff like that. Something that you've mentioned a lot in the book, I'd love to ask you about. It's not something I've really come across before, and I'm really curious. And I've taken excerpts out of the book, but basically, it's about the power of thought. And you say a few times that, it moves through us and it takes a form. And this is what I'm curious about, because for me, it's thinking, and it's whatever thinking I attach to. But you've actually mentioned that a thought could be thinking. You've said the thinky thoughts. You also say it could be images, sounds, sensations, music. You mentioned cramps at one stage, bloating, sweating, anxiety. I don't get that. What do you mean by the power of thought can show up as music? Is that music that I form in my head, or is it music I hear on the radio?
Right.
And I suppose I have a vague understanding of mind-body connection. So if you're saying thinking can show up as dizziness or the hot flashes or the sweats or whatever, I don't understand that. I would see, so I'm going through perimenopause. I would see that a lot of the symptoms I had were telling me that I was in perimenopause and I needed to go and see my GP, rather than my thinking creating it. I understand that it came to my senses via my thinking. Does my question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because this is something that I really enjoy talking about, actually. So the way, this is how I see it, and I know not everybody sees it that way, but that's okay. So as a lot of the book, I'm pointing to this idea of the three principles, which Sydney Banks, put together back in the 70s. And thought is one of the principles that he describes and points us to. So on my journey of understanding these ideas, I kind of realized, and I heard a couple of people talking about this, that there's a difference between thought and thinking, right? And when I first heard that, I was like, huh, what? Like, is there something else you can do with the gift of thought besides thinking? I thought I was missing out on something, Anyway, so when I started to think about it, I realized that, so thought with a capital T, meaning the principle of thought, the gift of thought, is a creative energy. And at this point, I always start moving my hands around because I don't know how else to describe, spiritual energy. I usually describe it as going, like that. It's like, it's always moving. The nature of any kind of energy. I mean, I am so not a scientist, but from what I understand from physics class in high school, energy is always moving. It's the nature of energy is to move. So thought as an energy, this creative spiritual energy, is always moving. And when it comes into, our little screen of consciousness, if you like, our personal mind, this formless energy takes a form. And thinky thoughts, as I call them, like walk the dog or do the laundry, is just one of the forms it can take. Because, we often make statements like, we live in a thought-created world 100% of the time. So I'm not good at numbers, but I'm pretty sure 100% means like all the time, right? There's no exceptions. There's no part of the time when it's not a thought-created experience. So therefore, when I'm having other experiences, like, like the example I always give is like when I was working in Hollywood and I was designing and creating weird and wonderful creatures and costumes and stuff for movies, I'd be asked to make something and I'd go, yeah, okay, we can do that for you, right? I was picturing in my head what it looked like or what we'd need to make it. There weren't any words. I didn't draw anything. I could picture, and anybody can close their eyes and picture something, whether it's, a beach or your kid's face or what's for dinner. We can all picture something in our minds. So images must therefore be a form that the creative energy of thought has taken in that moment. So if it can take that kind of form, then it can take the form of music. And like your example, is the music what I'm hearing, or is it something that's stuck in my head? I'd say both, because remember, there are no exceptions. It's, like if someone's a musician and they wake up like Mozart or, one of the Beatles wakes up with a tune, an original tune in their head, then that is pure thought, because it hasn't even been played on a piano or a guitar yet. It only exists in their mind. But I can also get like an 80s pop song stuck in my head, right? Or a commercial or something. And that's also happening via the gift of thought, because what else could it be? And then we come to sensations, like the dizziness, like the hot sweats, like, like brain fog and fatigue and all those things that, I was getting. I wouldn't say that thinking is necessarily creating those, because like you said, they are signals from our bodies. I remember, I think I put it in the book, I had a conversation with a client once, and she said for her hot flushes were, she liked to think of them as a cleansing, just like a washing out. Now that might not be everybody's understanding, but when she said that, I suddenly had a different relationship with a hot flush. Like, because before I'd go like, oh gosh, I can't believe this is happening, like put the air conditioning on, open a window, I mean, I literally when I would get a hot flush, it was sometimes it would feel like someone had put the gas, turned the gas stove right up to like, number 9, right in my chest. Woof, this, hot surge of heat would just go out the top of my head and I'd almost pass out. I'd feel faint from it. Now, I don't believe thinking created that, but I'm experiencing it via the gift of thought, because that's the form my experience took in that moment. Because if it wasn't thought, then I wouldn't know it was happening. To go back to my pain stuff, it's like sometimes we could have, like, I don't know about you, but I often used to have a bruise on my leg, and I think, where did that come from? Right? It's tissue damage, and I don't remember it happening, right? So pain, so things can happen in the body without us feeling or knowing about it. So my brain is so amazing. If it wants me to know, it will give it a sensation. And like you said, that sensation might take me to the doctor. It might take me to, change my diet. It might take me to do, some meditation or writing, whatever, makes sense to people. For me, it just, like the pain stuff, I learned to have, very little or nothing on it. And so my nervous system didn't overreact to it. And I believe that's why the symptoms went away, because, well, first of all, my body had done with the changing, and secondly, not overreacting to it enabled it to kind of downgrade the storm, as it were. And instead of being a tornado or a hurricane, it kind of got downgraded to, a tropical storm. And then I can't remember what the downgrade after that is, but like it's just like a bit of rain and a thunder and lightning, and it's passed through. So does that help? Does that make it a bit clearer?
Yeah, that's very good. Thanks. Thank you, Hannah, for that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I'll tell you, before we got into this call, I was wearing a peach, very fuzzy sweater because it's quite cold here. We had a big snow, and within maybe 10 minutes of getting onto the Zoom, all of a sudden, and it was like, the only thought I had, because I don't have anything on it due to thought, is you better change your sweater. This one's not going to work. The sweater came off. I'm no longer wearing peach. I have a zipper. I can do the fluff if I need. But it becomes that funny. It really does. It becomes so small in the experience when we see where it comes from. Yeah. I didn't always think that way. I would wear the sweater, for whatever reason. Oh, the peach color is way nicer on my face, or Zoom looks better. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes get into those places where, oh my God, what am I going to do? Turn your camera off. You go all of your thinking about what that is.
Right.
So it comes at any moment, and we just don't know where, but you're so dead on with how much energy, thought, and time I put onto it. Mm-hmm. It becomes so much more. And then it's a problem in my world. Yeah. I can make it a problem. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that, because when my hot flushes were really bad, I used to, in the morning, I'd time getting dressed when I was having a hot flush. Because like if I was just, getting changed and getting ready to go out and I don't want to put, all the heating on, then I would get dressed when I was having a hot flush, because then I wouldn't be cold and I could get dressed and I wouldn't need to put the heating on. You just reminded me of that.
Oh, dry. Okay.
I made use of them.
Wait, don't put the top on yet. Don't. Yeah. You'd have your blouse at the door.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, please.
Yeah, I liked your story about Ramona. It was very helpful because I thought it was an extreme story, and it helped me come up. There were 3 different people I was very upset with, and after I read the story and how you said it, separate realities, I'm like, that's it, like separate realities. These 3 people are upset with, it's all separate. And your story was more extreme than what I went through. But it was very creative. It was something, just a character you made up, not somebody you knew or anything. I thought that was amazing.
It's kind of happened. It actually did happen. My very first book, I would say about 80% of it is true, because I thought it was the only book I was ever going to write. So I put all my juicy stories in it, and all my Hollywood stuff, and a lot of things. And so there was very little fiction I had to make up. Maybe just connecting things together, I kind of fictionalized. But as I'm writing more books now, I'm, having to come up with more fiction. But the beginning of Painless, I don't know if those who've read Painless, it's about a girl who, she attempted suicide as a student, and that actually happened. I had a job as a counselor looking after a girl who'd had come here to Israel for a year, like a gap year, if you like, and she needed supervision until she went home. Different country, different, I change all the names, I change all the circumstances, obviously. And so the beginning of this book also, it actually happened where, I was working on an event where someone decided that they, I don't give it away, but for people who haven't read it, but, like you said, talk about separate realities. And I was saying to Kelly earlier, I bet if we were to hear their version of what happened, it could be completely different, and it would make sense from their point of view. And I've always been aware of that. So the way I describe it in the book, I was easily able to tap into the resentment and the absolute shock and horror of someone, who you trust, kind of betraying you, really. And I'm sure many of us have been in that situation where, we can, be in a situation where you feel like you're trusting somebody and you're working with them, and then you discover that they're on a completely different path and have a completely different idea about what's going on. And it can be quite a wake-up call sometimes. So, looking back, it was actually a very good experience in that, I mean, it was horrible, but it was a good experience to see where I was holding with my understanding. Because at the time, I was aware of the principles, and I knew it was my thinking. I knew I was being, holding this other person guilty for what they'd done. But I was so fixated on that they were wrong. It was very hard to let go of. And I had intrusive thoughts. I remember waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning going, but they were wrong, right? And, I wanted to take a full page ad out in the, the Jerusalem Post saying, never work with this person. And, maybe I should take them to the small claims court. I was angry. And anybody I told the story to, obviously never mentioning any names, they was always on my side, because if you hear a story like that, you're going to be on the side of the person who's telling it. And I can remember towards the end of that time, I knew the only way out of it was to let go. This person wasn't going to change. They clearly weren't coming back with, to fix the situation. And I knew that I was suffering as a result of my thinking about the situation and that person. That was the only thing that was creating my suffering, was my thinking and ruminating and overthinking of it. And I was very aware of that, but she was wrong, right? So, it was like a seesaw, like she was wrong and I was the innocent victim. And then over a period of a few weeks, it kind of went like this, where I started seeing that, yes, she was wrong. She made a mistake, but I'm the one suffering. And then it started going like this. And I started seeing, she was an innocent mistake. Maybe, it made sense to her. She was obviously, feeling that she felt justified for it. And then it was the weird thing. My cat is making noise right now. But the weird thing was, at the time, I could hear this little voice in the background, and it was saying, let go, just let go. And I knew that was the way out of it, but I wasn't ready yet. And it got a bit louder and a bit louder, like the voice was coming a bit louder towards me. And I can remember it was a Thursday night, and the voice was saying, let go. And I thought, okay, I'm ready to let go. And I felt like it would be about another week. In about another week, then I'll be able to let go. And the next morning I woke up, it was gone. It was gone. Now, I still thought she was wrong. I still think that, I wouldn't want to do another, interaction with this person. But the venom, the volume, the pain of it was gone. And that's the most amazing thing I find about this understanding. Sorry, my little cat is he's investigating. He's very cute. He's redecorating. And I found that it didn't hurt anymore. And in fact, I even have some compassion for this person now, because what was going on with them, I don't understand. And I don't need it to change for me to be okay, which is a huge blessing, because it's not changed and it's been a few years now. So I was able to move on and get free of it. And nothing out here had to change. Nobody had to change. It was just a shift in understanding. And that is one of many blessings of understanding the three principles, how we can get free of something without it needing to change out there for us to be okay. Yeah.
I also thought your concept of insight was also amazing. That insight is, I never thought of it. I mean, I know what insight is, but the concept that insight is really individual. It's not just, I'm going to give you some insight ideas. It has to come from you yourself. Like you mentioned, interesting weight loss. And I'm like, I finally managed to keep my weight off, but it's something that really only works for me. And it's my own insight. And I thought that was another new thing I picked up on, the idea that insight is not just a solution, but it's an individual solution for only me and nobody else. Right?
Yeah.
Right on?
Love it. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire, you had your mic off. I wondered if you wanted to share. Claire on her iPhone.
Oh, sorry.
I know sometimes you get caught in the listening of it all. I get it. I just wasn't sure because you're unmuted.
I joined really late. I'm decorating my flat and I just managed to jump on it. So I've missed most of it, I'm afraid. So
Okay.
I was determined just to catch the end. So
what was the pull to be here? What was the pull to be here? Do tell.
I've worked with Hannah. I've read all the books. Absolutely got so much out of it. Couldn't possibly put it into words without hours. So
thank you.
But yeah, absolutely life-changing. So sorry, I'm a bit flustered because I wasn't expecting anybody to notice me. I was just lurking in the background.
I call that than the on the spot.
Okay.
Well, you did good.
Yeah, you go ahead and fan away.
That was a real surprise. But anyway, yeah. Seriously, it's I'm halfway through reading it again, and it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. So many moments in it where I was either laughing, crying, wow, oh my God, just all the way through it. Amazing, absolutely amazing. So thank you.
Well, you've made my day. Thank you.
Honestly, it's absolutely, and I can't see very well. It's difficult, and somehow I just managed to just keep on reading. It was amazing.
Wow. I just want to say how grateful I am to hear you say this, because sometimes like writing is it's a very much a solo job. It's just you and the computer, and you just hope that it's gonna help somebody. You hope that the story is making sense. I always have a girlfriend of mine to read it through before I offer it to anybody else, just to make sure I'm not completely losing the plot, literally. And because everything else I've ever done in my work life has always been part of a team. When I worked in Hollywood, it was always part of a team. As a teacher, you're part of the teaching staff. It's always been with other people. So if it doesn't go right, you kind of like can shoulder that together. As a writer, it's on you. It's completely on you.
Yeah.
When you put a book out in the world, it's kind of like, you're kind of launching a ship, and it's like there's silence for a little bit whilst people are reading, and you're like, and then I could hear my thinking going, oh no, nobody likes it. Nobody said anything. Oh gosh, what I'm embarrassing myself this time. This time I've lost it. This time this one's no good. Right? So I really appreciate it when, like Katrina posted something beautiful today in the group, and you saying that, it really does mean a lot. And it's such a blessing to know that it's affecting and helping other people.
I think for me, it just resonated so much with what my gut thought about the subject. And when I was hearing kind of all the media stuff, because I'm in the UK, there's been so much media stuff about menopause and hormones in the last year. And my gut was telling me something different from what I was being told. And then like reading the book was just that kind of, well, of course, absolutely, of course. It kind of justified what my gut was telling me, but also gave me fresh stuff as well. So it was just, honestly, I can't imagine there is a woman on the planet who shouldn't read that book.
Yay.
And maybe some men too.
Yeah.
You never know.
I've just got to say something. Isn't it funny, from the mouths of someone who had nothing to share, how much came from that in the moments? Thank you. That was just really.
Well, I figured
beautiful.
once it started, I might as well carry on.
I'm going to nudge a little bit, just a little. But that's beautiful, Claire. That's really beautiful. I want to say that we have a question in the chat, and then we'll go to Barbara. How's that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Claire, again, for taking heed to my moment there.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say? What could you ask, what to say to people who hear this being this topic and this conversation, and then blame themselves for their thinking? And try to change it, their thinking, obviously, or try to get rid of it. How to express the fact that this is more about faith in something greater than doing.
Oh, I love that.
On their,
yeah. Because I love the premise of the question, because the question is implying that there is a greater source, a greater wisdom. And that is something I always want to point people towards, because I work with a lot of women with anxiety, health anxiety, general anxiety, all kinds of, there's lots of different labels. And I had someone the other day talking about travel anxiety. There's lots of different labels we can put on it. And, like Claire was saying, there's so much information out there in the media that is telling us that we need to fix something or change it. And when I started understanding, like I was saying just now, that thought is always moving, that thought, the energy of thought is always moving, then it's kind of, you kind of see that there's actually no point in trying to fix or change the thoughts, because they're going to move on anyway. That like clouds, like a river, it's constantly flowing. So that annoying thought that just went through my head has gone, right? It's like the train has already left the station. So trying to fix it or change it is kind of like dragging the train back into the station to work out how to make it leave, right? Well, it already left. So, and when I started to see that, any kind of fixing and changing is actually messing with the system. But referring to the blame part, my teachers, Dr. Bill Pettit, Dick Bettinger, have always stressed this idea that it's an innocent misunderstanding. When we hear that it's all in our minds and that we're feeling our thinking, it could be very easy to take that as a fault and blame ourselves for having that thinking or even listening to that thinking. But it's an innocent misunderstanding. I think we'd all do better if we knew better. I knew what I would have done. A lot of the mistakes I've made in my life, if I'd known better, I would have done better. It was an innocent misunderstanding. And I'd say things like blame are coming from a low mood. They're coming from that heaviness of a misunderstanding. Because I doubt, I don't know about you guys, but I've never heard someone in a good mood blame themselves for something. You never hear someone in a good mood say, I need to work on my self-esteem, for example, right? When we're in a good mood, when we're up and we're in that, wonderful, better state of consciousness, we are forgiveness, we are acceptance, we are gratitude. We don't have to work on it. It's who human beings are when they're in their right mind. So I would say that, I just keep pointing people back to the fact that we all have innate well-being, and there's this infinite source of love and creativity that's there guiding us. It's already making our hearts pump and our, temperatures change and making our cycles work. And when I get to see that we're taken care of and rely on that, then the anxiety starts to melt away. So I'd say keep looking in that direction. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Have you? Welcome.
Yeah. So I wanted to say I'm long past menopause, longer than Hannah is. But there was so much in there for me. And, even at that. And I think that I actually gave my husband a reading assignment when I finished it, because I told him, I said, he has 2 daughters. And I told him that anyone who knows women should probably read it.
Bravo.
Yeah.
I thought, there's certainly insights into for anyone to.
But thank you for that, Barbara. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to see you, and I'd be curious to hear what your husband makes of it. Please let me know.
I will.
There'll be a whole new men's group starting.
Yeah, to do a men's group on it.
I just want to be mindful. Thank you, Barbara. Just want to be mindful. It's 10:03, Hannah, and we said we would close on the hour. How are you feeling?
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. I want to say, like, my face is hurting from smiling. I always know I've had a good time when my cheeks start aching. So I really appreciate, everybody showing up, and Kelly for, hosting this, and, asking such great questions, and being a good friend and showing up to do this. It's, my heart goes out to everybody, and, I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And for future reference, Hannah, you have something that's up and coming for those that are here that might want to pass on to other people?
Yeah, 2 things actually. That one is that I plan on doing a book club with Very Well. I did it several times with my previous book, Painless, and it's a really nice way to, get a small group together, and we go through the ideas that are in the book, and we don't have to read the whole thing together, but we pick out, I can pick out things, and people in the group can pick out stuff that we want to talk about, ideas that we want to go into deeper and maybe understand the science more, or take a deeper dive into the principles, the ideas that I put in the book. So that's definitely something coming up to account for. And I kind of been doing a wellness program for a couple of years now. Like, I called it the Painless program because that was the previous book. But I really want to develop that into a program too, to for individual work, like one-on-one coaching with women who are struggling with any kind of hormone distress, and to take a deeper dive into that, as a one-on-one program. So that'll be coming. So yeah, those, if you're on my email list, you'll be hearing about that. If you're not on my email list, you can find me on Facebook, and drop me a line, and I'll get that information to you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who came, thank you for your participation. We don't have rooms like this without you, and you are important and valued in the room. So thank you for coming and making this room amazing. So we will see you all in somewhere on Facebook, in cyberspace, or back in the Kind Mind rooms very soon. So bye for now, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.